everyone, welcome to AE Live. I'm happy to have on a guest today. We are going to call the show the CFI Special. And the reason why is, like all pilots, we all have CFIs. We all have instructors, no matter if you are the top of your airline or if you're just the brand spanking new private pilot. We all have CFIs. So I have a CFI, and my CFI said, Bob, I have a guest I want you to go speak to. And his name is Brian Schiff. And I said, who the heck is Brian Schiff? No, I'm joking. So Brian does a lot of talks at like AOPA and safety seminars. And if you go online, you'll find him. He actually goes by the name, The Proficient Pilot, which is a name that is staying in his family. His father also, Barry Schiff, also went by The Proficient Pilot. And so our talk today with Brian is going to be on, ready for this? Proficiency. Amazing. And so with that, let's go ahead and bring in Brian. Hey, Brian, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks
to your CFI for recommending me.
Yeah. He comes up with some really awesome some folks sometimes. He says, "Hey, Bob, you have this thing, and I'd like to hear from that that person." And that's honestly, that's the best person you can get a request from.
So your flight instructor reaches to the bottom of the cookie jar for the last cookie in there, doesn't he?
That's right. Yeah, I'm expecting astronauts, whoever. He picked you. So,
wow. Well, I'm honored.
So Max, this show goes out to you. He'll be all happy to.
All right. Thanks, Max, for thinking of me.
That's right. All right. So now, I usually start these conversations and we talk about the origin story, right? So whether it's Marvel or if it's DC universe, right? You get the 12 different Batman, origin stories. So now your origin story, usually I ask folks, I say, did your parents fly, an uncle, an aunt, like, how'd you get to flying? And like for you, I know how you got into flying. I know
that guy,
that guy right there. Yeah. When your dad has a boxed set in aviation, right? There's not many box sets in aviation. So I'm going to ask the question, even though I kind of know. So for our audience that doesn't know, how did you get started in aviation?
Well, that's actually a fun question, and it had a lot to do with Dad. Actually, I just use him as my pen name. I've written all that stuff, and I just use his picture. And no, I'm kidding.
Fake it till you make it.
I grew up watching Dad, flying. I rode along with him all the time. And ironically, when I was a kid, I got airsick all the time, and I just hated going up in airplanes because I'd get airsick. I like going up. I like going places. He let me fly. In fact, I learned how to fly instruments before I could fly VFR because I couldn't see over the glare shield. I'm looking straight at the instruments because I was too short to see over. So I could fly. It was like a video game for me. And we'd be out at breakfast or whatever at the local airport cafe, and somebody would walk up invariably and say, "Hey, aren't you Barry Schiff?" And I'd be like, so it kind of gave me an impression of, okay, my dad must be somebody, and that was all really cool and all kind of annoying because it interrupted our meals all the time. Yeah. In aviation, big fish, small pond kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Somebody outside of aviation obviously wouldn't know who he was. But it was a day when I was about 11 years old that we went to the airport to pick up Dad from work. And we sat by the approach end of runway 24 right at LAX, and a big aluminum overcast thundering 747 comes flying overhead, and my stepmom points up to it and says, "Hey, your dad's flying that." And when I looked at that, and then she told me that Dad's flying it, that was it. I had to do it. That's one guy's in charge of driving that whole thing. And yes, he has a crew, but he was the captain on that airplane, and that was very motivating for me. And then it took me a few years to muster the courage. When I was 14, I finally asked him, I said, "What do I have to do to learn how to fly?" And he pulled me out into the garage. He opened up a big old box full of stuff that had my name on it. There was a sectional, an E6B, a plotter, a flying book. There was a flight training handbook at the time, the FAR aim, and all that stuff that he'd been waiting. Never pushed me once, but when I finally came to him, he was ready.
Well, That's cool. Yeah. And actually, before we get on to the rest of your career, you have, and I hope this is a good story because I didn't ask you before we started. You are now third generation, I hope. How did your son just did his practical last week, right? How'd that go?
Well, he didn't take it yet. We had to push it back
Oh, okay.
because of the DPE. Said he wasn't ready yet. Anyway, no, we postponed it a little bit. I'm a tough instructor to begin with, and I don't send. Some instructors will send a student with a hope that, okay, I'm just going to send him and we're going to roll the dice and hope this guy passes. We've all been there. If you're an instructor, you've done this before, and they pass or they don't. But with your son, you're not willing to play that game, and I'm holding him to a much higher standard because he's my son. I have high standards to begin with, but I'm holding him to a higher standard. And I just feel like I don't want to put any kind of DPE who I might know on the spot of feeling compelled to do something they shouldn't. And I just want him to be ready 100%. So we're going to take a little bit more time.
That's actually interesting, right? Because a lot of times if you take, aviation's a small community, especially if, you get the folks that are really into it like yourself. So, now all of a sudden you're right. Most DPEs, they're going to come out and they're going to say, well, I don't care, whose dad it is. I don't care whose, grandpa it is. I don't care. Right. It's on them. And that's what they should say. But and I know, there's a little bit of stress. Like if that DPE knows you and he knows your dad and so there's probably is a little bit more stress to kind of come up to a solution if there's a problem. And so that's actually really cool. So you actually were your son's CFI?
Yes.
So how hard, so you have to be honest with us now. Were there times after the flight that you and your son didn't talk for a day or two?
Oh, absolutely. And there were times like that. There were some very uncomfortable dinners when Dad was teaching me how to fly. Of course, That was the day when he would just smack me upside the head, and we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, the kids have too many cameras. So they record that stuff.
You're always on camera. But aside from that, you got to be tough with your students. And there are times when there are some uncomfortable periods of time afterwards. And, that is what it is. And luckily he'd go back into his room and he has video games to recover from all these times when I'm being a tough CFI. But for the most part, it went over pretty well. We didn't really have too many moments like that. He's a great student. He's a great stick. He's absorbing it like a sponge. And I think that, he'll be a great pilot one day.
That's cool. So we're going to preempt this and say he will be getting his pilot's license and he will be third generation. He's already been flying airplanes. He's already soloed. So, he's already a pilot. I'm a firm believer once you solo, like you may not have that private pilot certificate, but once you felt the wind under your wings, I feel like a Bette Midler song coming on. But once you have that wind, you're controlling the airplane and there's nobody else there. People will say, well, listen, the CFI's there, but they're not really taking control. That is a totally different feeling than when you're actually up there by yourself and you come to the very realization that if something happens, there ain't nobody there to bail you out. So that is the moment you become a pilot.
It's real.
Yeah, yep. That's the moment you're a pilot. So you are third generation aviation. Now I want to go back to something you said. So when you're do you do a lot of flight instruction, or is that something you're kind of just doing for your son, or do you have other student pilots?
Well, I do quite a bit. I do more flight reviews and instrument proficiency checks or advanced training on this or that and the other. I don't typically take on a full-time student right now because I'm just too busy. So I'll help out. I just recently helped someone out with their commercial and with another instructor as well, and gave a different point of view, an advanced point of view on how to do these maneuvers or that maneuvers. I do a lot of consulting and I have my job at the airline. So I'm pretty busy and I don't want to take on, it would be a disservice to a student to take on a full-time student right now. So I don't do that so much, but I am an active flight instructor.
Cool. Now, how important is it, let's say somebody's working on their private pilot, right? And they're working with the same CFI the whole time and they get ready to take their check ride. How important do you think it is for them to have kind of a second set of eyes just prior to that check ride to kind of maybe pick up something that the other instructor didn't see?
Well, I think it's not only important, but critical. One perspective, it's like, would you rather have one safety net or two or three or as many as they could fit? one instructor might not see something that another instructor will see. I think a phase check is absolutely critical. Going with other instructors also gives you other techniques. I am a potpourri of all the best things of all the instructors with whom I've flown. And that's one of the, we can talk about how airlines are so much safer than general aviation for so many reasons. And one of the things is you fly with so many pilots and you get to learn the different techniques of doing things. And you might see something, wow, I really like that. And you're going to take that and add it to your collection. And as if you only fly with one pilot, you only know one way, one technique. You've only seen one method of doing something that maybe that instructor hasn't seen other ways as well. So I think it's important to fly with definitely at least two pilots, two instructors, before you take a check ride, because they might see something that the other instructor doesn't see. For example, I gave a phase check to somebody before they went up for a private pilot check ride, and they were flying with both hands on the yoke. Mm-hmm. And is there anything wrong with that? No, there's no regulation against it. It's just a technique. And this other instructor never caught the fact that this pilot was doing that. But that's one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine. As an experienced pilot, I've seen a lot of mistakes made by pilots who are flying with both hands. So that was one of the little things that we caught. And what I basically do, every time they pull their hand off the throttle, I pull it back. Mm-hmm. And you need to fly with one hand, because I said, you're going to get your instrument rating one day, right? You want to be a professional pilot? Yes. Well, you need your other hand for tuning radios, for programming GPS, for pulling up a chart, using your iPad, whatever. You need to fly with one hand. So that was one of the things that we caught. But there's so many like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I want to go into, before we talk about proficiency, because you are an airline pilot, and are you, now that COVID's not over, right? Unfortunately, there's people still dying every day, and, we're still going through all this. But as the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, is starting to shine, are you seeing not general aviation, but aviation, especially commercial aviation that you're in, it seems like it's starting to pick up. I think I saw that Delta was hiring 300 brand new pilots, just this last week. So it does seem like it's starting to come back up. Are you seeing that pick up as well?
Absolutely. Our flights have been full because we're giving away tickets, really, basically. So you can't judge by how full the flights are. But the prices are coming back up, which is showing there's more demand. I think I read in one of our newsletters that we're going to be pulling all the airplanes out of storage and getting them back active again. And there was announced that there will be no furloughs, and hiring is on the horizon again. So absolutely, it's coming back. It's spinning back up. My son was worried. He goes, "Oh, well, should I really be getting into this career? Is this something I should be doing right now?" And I said, absolutely. Look at the whole hiring process has been on pause while you're getting your licenses and ratings and certificates. And so that it's waiting for you, so to speak. But yes, I see a lot of indications pointing to the industry spinning back up, and people are ready to get going again.
Yeah, I even think it's, I think if you were, I don't know where your son is in, his career with his schooling, but is he still in high school, or is he going to college yet, or?
He's a senior graduating from high school in a couple months, and then he'll be going to UND to attend their aviation program there.
Very good. Hey, listen, UND, if you're listening, I sent you an email. I'm looking for somebody to come over and talk to us about UND. I got Embry Riddle coming on. So just, little plug for Embry Riddle. UND, where are you? Anyways.
They'll be here.
Come on, UND.
We'll get them here.
Please do. Because I work with a lot of kids that are about the same age as your son then, right? So in Civil Air Patrol, we work, basically middle school and high school and a little bit of college. And so I keep trying to tell them, over and over again that, now is actually probably a really good time to become a pilot, because there's a lot of pilots, I think, that actually left. That, they were maybe a little bit middle-aged, like, they looked like us, right? They had the gray on the side, and they looked like us, and, they can't be furloughed for a year, right? So they went and they got another career. And so I think you have pilots that have left, and you're going to have a pilot shortage, I think.
Oh, there will be a pilot shortage. There was one right before COVID, and we were wondering, where are we going to get all these pilots from? We need this many pilots. And if you were to look at, and I could show you the retirement schedule for the next 10 years. And just to give you an example, at my airline, we have 14,000 plus pilots. Mm-hmm. Half of them retire in the next 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question. So let's say, we always focus on the younger, coming up pilots. What if you're somebody, say, this is before me, but let's say somebody's in their mid 30s and, they've been flying general aviation and they find, what? They come home from work and they jump on Microsoft Flight Simulator because they just, they like flying better than they like their job, right? Is there an age where you think that it's kind of too late to really kind of jump in for somebody that might be interested in making a career change into aviation?
Yeah, I think if your mandatory retirement age is 65 from the airlines, you can still fly corporate beyond that or charter Part 135 above that age. But so I'm going to say no, unless you want to go to the airlines, then you got to be ready by, in order to work and then retire at age 65. In the 30s, I would still regard that as young. 40s, I would say you could make that lane change as well. It takes a few years to get the licenses, the certificates and ratings that you need, and then build up some time. Then you can put in a good 10-year career doing it, and it would be a wonderful 10 years. I mean, if you were 55, even if you're, going to charter or corporate, or many of the other ways you can make money flying airplanes, you can do it beyond that age. So there's no minimum age I'm going to throw out there because you can always do it if you want to. I had a doctor I spoke with who, while practicing medicine, and I would say he was in his mid 40s, and said, I really love flying airplanes. He had an airplane. I said, you should try flying, because I want to fly jets. I don't know how I'm going to get to fly a jet. I said, well, get your, commercial instrument, all that, build up some. He had the flying time already, and I said, apply to the commuters, and he did. He went to a commuter and started flying CRJs and absolutely loved it. And he's a doctor, but he loved doing that as well, and he was doing both jobs actually.
That's pretty cool. So yeah. So I always think of the CRJs as like hard, like especially if you're older, like you almost gotta like wait till your kids are out, right? Because usually with the CRJs, it's hard to get a home base near where you live, right? So usually you're traveling a lot, even to get to work.
Yeah, and commuting is a possibility. It makes for a lot more difficult career as an airline pilot because you're spending more time commuting, so more time away from home. But as a single guy with no family, or I shouldn't say guy or gal, anybody without a family, makes it real easy because you're not leaving a family behind. With a family, it makes it more difficult to spend those extra days commuting, but it is doable.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. So let's say you get somebody, whether they're your son's age or, they're that 30-year-old or 40-year-old, or even the doctor, right? If somebody, I think getting your pilot's license, I think is pretty well understood, right? You're flying somewhere between 40 to 80 hours, and you pass a check ride. And then I always recommend you get that instrument rating right away. Like I personally, I think that, I understand why there's freedom and, you shouldn't mandate things but honestly, that instrument rating, I think, should be almost like something you should just do, get yourself out of trouble. So
yeah, I agree. If your aspirations are to go fly around on weekends and just go out for a beautiful $100 hamburger, fly locally and all that, maybe not so much. If your aspirations are career oriented in aviation, or if you plan on using the airplane for travel, to go, cross country flying and go places, the instrument rating is invaluable. It will not only make a better pilot out of you, it'll sharpen your skills, and it can get you out of trouble when needed. Yeah.
So now the folks that get their private pilot and their instrument rating, and then obviously have to go commercial, multi-engine, and then, the big bad boy is ATP, right? So, walk us through, like, when you were learning how to fly and you had a little bit of a leg up, right? Because you had somebody in your family with your dad who was obviously so into it. You just had you just had a community around you, built for that. So for somebody that maybe doesn't have a community, maybe, like, I always try to think about like that kid that lives in a rural area, right? It may take them an hour just to drive to their closest airport. But they have a dream of being, a commercial pilot like yourself. So once they get that private and then hopefully the instrument, like what's that line? Like, how do they get from being a private pilot to getting a job in the airlines? I know that's a long answer, but what's your recommendations there?
Live, eat, sleep, breathe aviation.
Mm-hmm.
You got to love it. If you don't love it, you're not going to be good at it to begin with. And you're not going to have the fortitude to put in that hour to get there, the travel time, if you're not anywhere near an airport. But so you've got to love it. I've talked to some people who wanted to do it because it looked like a great, easy job that you don't have to work that much and you get paid a lot of money and you have a lot of time off. And that's not the reason to do it. The reason to do it is because you love it. you love doing it. There are many negative aspects about the job, but from private pilot, you've just got to keep plugging away. You've got to keep working at it, go for the instrument next, the commercial, go to air shows, attend webinars. As far as that community goes, watching webinars like this and YouTube channels like yours, getting involved in the community. It's a small community. It's very easy now to get involved virtually online with the community, attend forums, look at forums, read. ALP has a great forum. There are all kinds of forums on the internet where you can just read and participate, but be very careful. Be cautious of the expert behind the keyboard who can type almost any kind of advice.
Right.
But the idea is to just keep moving and keep learning. Learn as much as you can. Attend classes. The wings courses are free. You get credit with the FAA, and there's a lot of great material in there. So just keep on learning. And taking one class is going to lead to another. If you're anything like me, because I'll start looking into one topic and then I'll see a squirrel on another topic and go chasing that one. And then as I'm studying one topic, I get a list of other things I want to go look at. You've really got to be interested in it enough to be doing that and participate in as much online. Go to, when we start getting the in-person seminars and Sun and Fun is coming up. If you have the ability to get to those places where there's a fly-in or any kind of aviation gathering, EAA is a wonderful one as well. And obviously joining Civil Air Patrol for younger people as well.
Yeah. I definitely also, I will, since you mentioned it, I try not to plug too much about Civil Air Patrol. Otherwise I'll end up talking, not letting you guys talk. But yeah, everything you said, like between flying with different people, if you're GA, you don't have access to flying with as many pilots typically, as you would in the airlines. But if you join Civil Air Patrol, that actually is a really good way of getting that kind of experience. Because, we have rules that you can't fly with the same check pilot more than, twice in a row. So that third time you have to have a brand new check pilot. So it forces the issue. Plus, we do a lot of orientation flights and mission flights and, so you're flying with lots of different pilots. And frankly, a lot of our pilots, a lot of them are airline pilots or they're ex-military or they're ex-airline pilots. So even though you think to yourself, okay, well, you might be a general aviation person with say 250 hours, the person that you're flying next to, they might be 65 years old, but they might have 15,000, 20,000 hours, and flew for the airlines. So they may be able to give you some thoughts that you're not even thinking of. Because even, your CFIs may be under 1,000 hours. They're building up their hours to get that career job. So Civil Air Patrol, you may be flying with people that have significantly more experience than maybe even your CFIs. So,
that's great. And I know that you guys, how you operate. And so you're going to get a lot of not only experience and diversity in pilots with whom you're flying, but the discipline that under which you guys operate and the regard for safety and standardization as well. I think those are positive aspects of what you guys are doing that I try to teach in the Part 61 world of training as well.
Now, you, so moving forward a little bit, I'm thinking about my CFI again, Max. So Max, again, this is the Max episode. So, Brian, we thought this was going to be the Brian Schiff episode, but this is going to be the Max, the CFI episode. So, so let's say Max, I'm going to pick on Max. So if Max goes and, he gets his airline job, right? What's your recommendation for brand new, first officers that are just kind of, just getting into the right seat for the first time? What would you recommend for them to help them their careers as they start to, literally take off?
Get the book, How to Be a Chameleon for Dummies.
Is that really a book?
No, it's not.
Okay. I was going to go look it up.
The most difficult aspect of becoming a new first officer is really and we joke about it. A good first officer is a good chameleon because he has to change his colors to adapt to the captain with whom he's flying or she is flying, because everybody's so different. And you're going to fly with people. You need to be able to learn and adapt to. Now we have standards that we operate by. And everybody's supposed to do the same thing, but there are also there's a lot of leeway in our professional flying for technique as well. So you see a lot of different techniques. As a new first officer, you should be prepared to absorb the techniques that you like, discard the ones you don't like, but evaluate them, but be respectful of the rank of the captain who is in charge of the flight. Also, we're also teaching CRM, and that's a very big thing, a lot more than we used to, because it used to be, a crotchety old smoking pilot would tell you to just sit down and shut up and, don't touch anything unless I tell you to. It's a little bit different now. And it's not to say that the first officer has an equal vote as the captain. His decision is overriding. But what we're teaching now is not to just sit there and be submissive and hint and hope that if you see 2 out of 3 green lights, just to hint that it's 2 out of 3 green, or to hope that the captain sees it. You're supposed to be assertive and point things out when there are a safety aspect. So to be assertive regarding things for safety and know when to be assertive, it's a very difficult balancing act for a new first officer. Like if we look at that Little Rock accident, the MD-80 went into Little Rock. They were tired. They flew all day. Brand new pilot flying with a chief pilot. And the brand new pilot is to assume that, well, this is not only a very experienced captain, but he's the chief pilot. So I'm not going to call him out or correct him. Well, you know what? If you're about to land in a thunderstorm, I think that's an okay time to call him out and say, I'm not comfortable with this. And so you need to know when to be assertive as a first officer who is green, but yet also be a sponge to absorb all the great things that you're going to learn from flying with a diverse group of pilots.
That's cool. Yeah. So if you see, you said the 2 green and the 1 red, don't just go, you know what? I like Christmas time because, all the green and red lights, point out the red light. If you look at, especially on the commercial side, you see so many of the accident reports that come up from NTSB, and so many of them we're all human and we all make mistakes. I don't care if you're a 300 million hour pilot. We all make mistakes. Our brains all turn off sometimes. And so that's why I think airlines are so safe, is because you have that second person that can say, hey, I can see your brain turned off. Did you notice this? So, question for you. So, now we're going to get into proficiency in a second. We're going to work our way into it. But, there's a lot of the airline folks, once they go from general aviation to the airlines, you don't see a lot of them coming back to general aviation. Now, some of them do, obviously, like yourself. But what are some of the things, what are some of the safety lessons, say, general aviation can take away from the commercial pilots? You actually mentioned, about the commercial aviation, having the safety record. So what are some of the things GA can take away from the commercial aviation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of my most popular seminars I give is airline techniques for GA pilots. And I changed that because it's not just airline techniques, it's actually, professional pilot techniques, because it's not to say that a charter pilot or some other professional cargo pilot, whatever, can't bring to the table as well. So professional techniques, there is a more strict set of regulations, and that's FAR Part 121 for the airlines to operate under. For starters, there is no reason that a GA pilot who's flying under Part 91 can't adhere to Part 121 limits. So we have a buffer for landing distances. We have a buffer for takeoff distances. A GA pilot can descend or begin an instrument approach when the weather is 0-0. At the airlines, we cannot do that. We need to the weather needs to be above minimums before we can begin an approach, or we just don't do it. There's numerous regulations like that it's perfectly fine for a GA pilot to apply to their own flying. And for starters, that's one of them. We have a stabilized approach criteria. If you're trying to get down and you're high and you know it, look at the four white pappies, but at least I'm high, at least I'm fast. Watch this. I think I got this. I think I can do it. If those words enter your head, go around. In GA, if you're not stable by 300 feet, you should be doing a go around. In jets, it's 1,000 feet. If we're not stable by 1,000 feet, and stable by meaning you're on speed, your power is set for your approach and not back at idle. In GA we do power off approaches, so I'll give you that. You're not configured for landing, and things just aren't looking good. Do a go around. We have mandatory go arounds under certain conditions. So a stabilized approach. Sterile cockpit is another one that GA pilots can use at the airlines. We're not allowed to have conversation that's not pertinent to the safety of flight when we are in a critical phase of flight, meaning for us, it's below 10,000 feet, or when we're taxiing out for takeoff. Well, GA, I would say below 1,000 feet or 3,000 feet. Keep it sterile. Brief your passengers to do the same thing. A lot of chatter in the airplane can really be distracting for a pilot. Now we have intercoms that can isolate themselves, and that's helpful. But brief the passengers that we're going to be quiet here. And we also now have a sterile time as we're approaching our level off altitude. You say the last 500 feet approaching level off altitude, you can consider that to be a time to be sterile, because especially if you're IFR, it's very critical not to miss your altitude or when you're getting close to airspace. But one thing that I brief my first officers is that we can operate at one of two speeds, and we choose this. It's slow or screw up. And I don't always say screw up. Sometimes I use a different word.
Right.
So that's a big thing that even my students see is never rush to comply. And all my accident investigation, and I do quite a bit of forensics looking into accidents and why they happen. One very common denominator is a flight crew rushing to comply with ATC, or rushing to beat the weather, or operating quickly for whatever reason to save time. Who does their run up while they're taxiing out? Flight controls and
Right.
do their run up, and then you don't need to do it in the run up area. Well, if you do that, you're setting yourself up. You're not offering the engine and fuel system enough time to prove themselves to you. So you don't want to just fire up, taxi out, and take off. That time you take in the run up area is organizing your thoughts. It's being thorough with the checklist, and it's offering that, for example, the fuel system an opportunity to prove itself to you. You don't want to burn through all the fuel in the lines, and then right after takeoff, that's when your engine failure happens, and that's a whole other topic. But so slow down. That's another technique that I really teach strongly, is to operate slowly and deliberately. And that's something that we do at the airlines. We don't rush. And when I do, like I said, I tell my first officers, if you see me rushing, slow me down. If I see you rushing, I'm going to slow you down.
All right. So let's talk about proficiency. Actually, before we talk about proficiency, this maybe ties to proficiency. So since you're so involved in general aviation, plus you're also obviously an airline pilot, and you've lived that lifestyle, there's a real difference between checklists and flows, right? So especially for our younger folks that maybe, they've been in GA, but they haven't seen especially after 9/11 and COVID and everything else, right? The door's closed. You can't look up front anymore to see what the pilots are doing. So, yeah. So explain what a flow is. And do you think that's one of the reasons why, the airlines are maybe safer than GA?
I think that is one of the many reasons that we can attribute that safety record to. And I do try to bring that to GA. Like, for example, if I'm teaching engine failures in a Cessna, for example, there's a flow called, I teach the backwards 7. You're starting down there at the fuel selector, coming up to the throttles, make sure I can go across all the way to the primer. It's a backward. Well, and then I had a student point out to me that that's actually it's a forward 7.
Okay.
Like, really? Yeah, it is. So we also name our scans. It's a forward 7, but who draws it from the tail to the top? That's backwards to me. So we're drawing it backwards. Anyway, I remember as a flight engineer on the Boeing 727 when I first started. Well, that was an eternity ago, but we had names for scans. We had, like, for this after start, we'd do a Z scan with a tail, and we'd do a T scan or whatever scan. But the importance is to look at everything that's on the checklist and do it in a pattern that you're going to do every time. Mm-hmm. And this is where just sitting in the airplane with your instructor and having an instructor come up with this flow for you, like, let's do the before start flow. There are certain things on there you need to do. Well, let's take a picture of that cockpit, circle each of these things and say, okay, what's a logical order so that I'm not going back and forth?
Right.
What's a logical order? So that's a flow, is going through a certain flow. And then if it resembles a shape of something, give it a name. If it looks like a P, we'll call it a P scan, or a diagonal, we'll call it a slash scan, whatever, or we just call it the before start flow. Mm-hmm. But those flows are something that we do, and because we have the muscle memory, we do it every time. You're focused on doing the task. Then you go to the checklist, use it to actually check that you accomplished all that. So at the airlines, we pre-flight the airplane. We do our whole flow. We go up and down the panel in a certain pattern every time. And when we get to something, we know how to pre-flight that one thing. When that's all finished, we do a checklist. When one pilot reads the checklist to the other. And in single pilot resource management, this is something that the pilot can do to himself as well by simply reading it aloud and looking at the thing. And if you get to a step where it says primer in and locked and you don't remember touching it in your flow, then go grab it and yank on it. Make sure it is in and locked at that point. Or doors and windows closed, you don't remember confirming that. At that point, stop the checklist and double check. But if you did do it and you remember doing it, then keep moving through the checklist. And it's the problem with just reading and doing. And I do promote that with brand new students. I'll say, because it's like a read and do, because they don't know how to do it yet. They haven't developed any kind of scans or flows. So we do it as a read and do just for learning, but later it becomes just a checklist. But the problem with it is your thumb can slip down one step. You're doing this step, and then you come back here while you're doing it. Your thumb moves down 2 steps, and then you skip one of the steps when you're reading and doing, and that can be tragic.
Yeah, I just grabbed. I had one by my desk, right? So here's a checklist for folks that aren't in aviation yet or aren't flying yet, and so this is a smaller checklist. They make bigger ones, but as you can probably tell from the camera, these items are really small. And so, if it's especially in GA, right? You typically don't have air conditioning in the airplane. So it can be 100 degrees outside. You've got your family in the back. They're sweating. You're miserable. You're trying to grab an IFR clearance that maybe you're getting routed someplace you're not familiar with. And then you kind of, like you said before, you kind of feel like you're getting rushed by ATC. You got 3 people behind you in line to take off. And now you're doing this checklist. And it's real easy just to try, to mentally miss, steps.
Yeah.
I know one time, I'm always free to admit my mistakes. I went to do a takeoff and I still had the carb heat on because I'm used to flying fuel injection. And so mentally I had the right checklist that had, turn carb heat off. But I didn't have the mental flow for it. So I think those flows are really helpful. And I hope that we do see that coming more into GA.
Yeah, they're very, very important. And at the airlines where I work, we're actually calling it triggers and flows, because something should trigger the flow. One of the triggers, for example, is the last engine started. So if you only have one engine, it started, then that should trigger your after start flow. Make sure everything is how it should be for after start. So kind of form triggers as well. I think that's just as important along with what your flow is when are you going to do it? And something should trigger it for you. And there were times when I would take a light bulb cover off of something and put it over onto something, other switch or something that would remind me that, because when that light came on, I had to go do this other thing. There are techniques like that you can use. There are all kinds of techniques that I think instructors should employ. And one of them, is just getting out of the ramp area from the tie down. You're going to taxi away. What's your biggest risk at that point? And I'm quizzing you because I'm quizzing everybody. It's a pregnant pause just so everybody who's watching can kind of think, well, what is my biggest risk? And a good pilot is always trying to figure out what is the risk at this point. There always is a risk. Just getting out of bed involves risk, especially
probably
for
the
me.
Fuel truck behind me or something. There's something on the ramp that I can't physically see.
Yeah, that's one. Absolutely. But no, I'm talking about embarrassment.
Being
embarrassed of attempting to taxi away with your tie down still hooked up. That's your biggest risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Forget about, chopping up
your chock is in. Yeah.
child with your propeller or blowing away a fuel truck. No. It's embarrassment.
Right.
So I find a way to mitigate that risk. Find out, okay, what could embarrass me? Well, trying to taxi away with my tie down still on. How do I mitigate that? Well, I teach my students to grab, when they're up at the nose of the airplane, to grab the hub of the propeller and make sure it's on solid. But now let's go ahead and pull the airplane forward a few feet so that you can pre-flight the entire 360 degrees of each tire. And I tell them that's why they're doing it. But that's not the real reason. None of my students have ever attempted to taxi away from a tie-down area or a parking spot because they've always pulled the airplane forward a few feet to do what they think is checking the tires. But it's not. It's just about avoiding the risk of embarrassment. We don't want to be embarrassed.
I saw a real quick story I think maybe you'll enjoy. So Oshkosh one year. So I was at Oshkosh one year and the grass was a little higher than it probably should have been. We had a lot of rain, and there was a van that was really low to the ground. And so when people are thinking, you think of airplanes, to your story, they think of airplanes on tarmacs, and especially like a high wing Cessna. Like, how could you miss that tie down, right? But then you go to something like Oshkosh, you go to a grass field, especially, right, where you don't have, and especially if they're using a green, a grass colored green rope, and you have a low wing airplane. So visually you have to get down to go look at it. There was a guy at Oshkosh one time. We all saw it happening. We all tried waving at him, but his eyes were inside the cockpit, which is actually bad too when you start your engine. And but his head was all inside. We're like, you're you're chocked in. You get your rope in, and he didn't see us. He guns it. And he goes to start moving, and his airplane just was like yanked to the side. Oops. It was pretty funny.
So. Yeah, there's those who have and those who will. None of my students don't because they pull it out. But speaking of rolling, here's another great. What's your greatest risk when you're in the run-up area and you're applying power to do your run-up? What's the greatest risk at the time of power application?
This is a tricky one. All right, I'm trying to think where you're going, and I'm probably going to be wrong. So I'm going to say there's something that's going to blow backwards into somebody.
Well, that's possible.
Okay,
no,
I was wrong.
It's actually rolling forward. Because everybody's looking down at the tachometer, right?
Oh, right.
While we're adding all this power. And I've seen airplanes in the run-up area, and if you've been out there long, and this is the beauty of experience. I mean, eventually you're going to see all these things happen. Hopefully it's not you see someone else do it. And even the worst case would be that you roll into another airplane or you roll in front of somebody who's taxiing. But so what I do with my students is we play a game. What I want you to do in the run-up is I want you to guess where 1700 RPM is. Just look out the window and see if you can set the power, and we're going to see. And then and when you think you're at 1700 RPM, go ahead and look down at the tachometer and see if you can get it. And if you do, then the hamburger's on me after the lesson. And so it's a game to see, but this does several things. It teaches them to learn the sound of the airplane, which I really think is important for pilots to become in tune and at one with the airplane, with its sound and its feeling and everything like that. And I don't mean the emotions of the airplane. I mean how it feels when you're flying it. But the purpose of it isn't to learn how to set the tachometer 1700 RPM without looking at it. The purpose is to be looking out the window when you're adding power, because if you start rolling because you're not holding enough brakes or your brakes aren't working, that's when you're going to see it. So there's mitigating risk. And so the whole thing is about what are the risks? How do we mitigate it? So as an instructor, you come up with little things like this. I want eyes outside the airplane when you're adding power at all times. That's the game I play.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think that in GA, especially single pilot GA, with all of our fancy glass screens now, that just demands so much attention. And instead of people tuning in their radios and setting up their flight plans, I see so many people doing that while they're taxiing, and then their heads are down in their laps and they're not looking outside.
And there are some flight schools. I've given some phase checks or flight reviews to pilots who have come out of the big school aviation programs, who won't be mentioned here, but they do a lot of things while they're taxiing the airplane. I don't like that. The only thing you should be doing while you taxi the airplane is if you're on an instrument flight, you want to check your gyros. You want to test your brakes, but otherwise your focus should be 100% out the window, focusing on getting the airplane safely to an area where you can do all these checks and get your eyes inside the cockpit, especially as a single pilot. So as a single pilot resource management, don't do any inside the cockpit tasks while you're moving the airplane on the ground. You're looking for double yellow lines you don't want to cross, and you're looking for things that you don't want to hit. So if you stay on the concrete and don't hit anything, that's your goal. And when I have students who do that, I take the sectional. Yeah, I still have paper sectionals, not to read anymore because they're on my iPad, but they're great for making a big long screen to block the other side of the cockpit. So that they can't look at anything or do anything while they're taxiing out. I'm like, focus outside. You should be eyes out the window when you're taxiing to the runway. But there are a lot that, like I said, these big flight schools at a university level, because they're so busy and flight time means so much, they're trying to accomplish things while they're taxiing out. And that falls into the two speeds concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too fast or too slow or too fast.
Slower screw up, yeah.
Slower screw up. I'm almost thinking like it'd be funny is to find like a dashboard. It's got the little lip that comes over, right? Because usually the light's underneath it, and to put like a little shower screen, Slide it over and slide it back during taxi. Yeah, most of your checklist, right? The setting of the avionics is part of the pre-taxi checklist. It's not in the taxi checklist.
Get that done ahead of time. And as a multi-pilot crew, we are now, our policy is to tell the other guy we want 4 eyes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And when your co-pilot or whoever's not taxiing the airplane is going to look down and do something, we say, hey, I'm going eyes in. And that brings up a level of alertness. Bleh. How do you say alertness?
Alertness.
That's it. It brings the pilot who's taxiing up to a higher level of alertness because he knows level of alertness. That's really cool. That's kind of fun to say.
Should make that a book.
Levels
of alertness.
Anyway, so we tell the other guy, hey, I'm looking down. So you're not going to go looking down while he's looking down. So it's, as a single pilot resource management would dictate that you talk to yourself and brief yourself as well. And I think I always tell my first officers, hey, I verbalize everything I'm doing so that you know what I'm thinking. And if I'm going to pass this taxiway but turn left on the next one, I verbalize it. I said, okay, going past Bravo, next one's Charlie, I'm turning left there. I say that out loud so that he knows what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, and he doesn't have to hope that I get it right. And if I'm approaching a hold short line, I say, all right, here comes the runway. I'm going to hold short right here. Single pilot resource management dictates you should do that to yourself. Talk to yourself out loud, because when you say it out loud, your inner pilot hears it. Your inner co-pilot, your inner backup pilot monitoring hears you say that, and you become a better pilot as a single pilot.
Yeah, 2 things. One, I think I'm going to steal that idea, the eyes inside. I really like that. Even in because Civil Air Patrol, we fly a lot of 2 people, flights as well. Because usually one person is responsible for the mission activities and one person is responsible for not flying into something. But when we were taxiing, having, everybody looking outside, that we train that a lot as well. But I really like the idea of verbalizing, if you're going to set up the mission radio, because we have, for people that don't know in CAP, we have extra radios and extra gear inside the airplane above and beyond what GA usually has. And so, so we usually, very similar to like in an airline pilot, you would have your company, your company radio. CAP has something very similar to that setup. And so if you're going to bring your eyes in, I think it actually is good, because then the other pilot who may be expecting you to be also looking now knows, okay, they're the sole person looking outside that window. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend you do that. And something you said earlier, I think you were alluding to when we talked about looking at all these accidents and the human factor, is the errors that we make. Now, everybody, I'm sure yourself excluded, but all of us make mistakes.
I have landed in an airplane without putting the wheels down, so I can't take myself out of that one.
It's not in the mistakes that we make. It's in how we recover from having made that mistake.
Right.
And so we all make errors, and it's like, if I'm going to tip a waitress, I'm not going to base my tip on what goes wrong. I'm going to base my tip on how that waiter or waitress handled what went wrong.
Right.
Well, as a pilot, our lives depend on how we handle what goes wrong and how we can manage our errors. The biggest cause of accidents is human, error, obviously. But we want to trap these errors. And if you're talking about a multi-pilot crew, the most common trap for the mistakes is the pilot monitoring. Mm-hmm. Somebody watching. I've made my best landings from the flight engineer's seat. I don't even have a set of flight controls, but sitting back there overlooking the other pilot doing things, the pilot monitoring is crucial, and that's become a very important thing in the airline industry. So if you guys are operating in a scenario, even if you have 2 private pilots going up to go get a hamburger together, you have 2 pilots. Mm-hmm. The other pilot now becomes a pilot monitoring, and there's a pilot flying. Well, the pilot monitoring is the one who traps the problems, because he's watching and he knows what should be happening, and should speak up and mention it when he sees something or she sees something that should be different or what's about to go wrong.
That's an acronym, by the way, for those who are just getting into aviation. That's creeping into more and more of the FAA books. You'll see PF and PM. And up until about 10 years ago, I don't think you hardly ever saw them say PF and PM. So if you're not familiar with what that means, what does PF mean, PM? It means exactly what Brian just said. So PF is the pilot flying the airplane, and PM indicates the pilot monitoring, the performance of what the pilot's doing.
And interestingly, it used to be called, when this was evolving, it used to be called the pilot not flying. So it's the PNF. So PF and the PNF. But PNF means it kind of gave a negative connotation to, or a connotation to not doing something.
Right. You're just hanging out.
When that's not really what it should be. The pilot who's not flying the airplane actually has a very active role in the safety of that flight. So they're monitoring. So they changed it from pilot not flying to pilot monitoring because it has a more positive, active connotation.
Now, Brian, I have one more question before we kind of get into it, but I want to make sure I have you for enough time. I don't want to keep you for longer than you have free. So do you got a few extra minutes to talk?
I have until Easter. We have Easter dinner tomorrow night.
All right. I won't be that long. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. And I think this is a great conversation for a lot of, especially for the folks that are just learning to fly. And so, cause you have both sides of it. So now what is something that you see, in your airline, you might've already kind of mentioned it, but what do you see something maybe in your airline career that you think that we're either not training properly or the GA community could do better to improve our safety?
What am I seeing is not being done properly at the airline level or GA?
At the GA level, that once you get to the airlines kind of have their own way of doing it, and if GA kind of absorbed the way that the airlines are doing something, could improve safety in GA.
I think two things come to mind. The first is standardization, to do things the same way, every time, do it the same way, because you get into that standard loop. And when you get something happens outside that, it stands out. When something non-standard happens, it sticks out and it catches your attention more readily. So operate with a set of standards. Do it the same way every time. Have your standards under which you're going to operate. I'm going to do it like this every time, and be flexible enough to change them as time goes on. It's a living, breathing document. These standards in your, whether it's written or in your head, but let them evolve into what works best for you and your operation. The airlines operate under a set of standards. That's how we can fly with thousands of pilots who we've never met before, hop in an airplane and safely fly it from one place to another, because we know what the other is going to do. And because we all operate under these standards. But as a single pilot, same thing. Operate under standards. The second thing that I see GA having a little bit more of an issue with, and than I think professional pilots, is assertiveness with ATC. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, I'm not trying to get the impression that you need to be rude to ATC or be argumentative or contrary to what they're saying, but there is a time when a GA pilot needs to be assertive with ATC, and they need to know that they are flying the airplane, not the controller. So when a controller says, clear for immediate takeoff, and you're not ready, mm-hmm. What do you do? And when you ask a new pilot that, or you observe a new pilot, they will feel pressured to hurry up and take off. But they need to be assertive with ATC for their own purpose and say, unable, I'd rather wait, I'm not ready yet, something like that. Mm-hmm. But using the word unable, or the word say again, or speak slower, and most importantly, not being afraid to declare an emergency if you truly have one, and doing it early. Mm-hmm. So before every flight, I just declare the emergency, put 7,700 in before takeoff, and I am treated with kid gloves on every flight. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke.
Yeah, I saw a video where somebody
going wrong and things are not normal. You need to tell ATC, even if you just have to talk in plain English. Hey, I've got this happening. I'm not quite sure how it's going to affect my flight. Let them know. Let them know what's going on, because they can be an incredible resource to you if they know what's going on in the cockpit. So tell them what you need, what you can't do. If they ask you to do a 360 on downwind and you're not comfortable with it for whatever reason, because of weather or your own, just say unable. They'll find another plan for you. Ask for another plan, and don't just give in or do what you're told, because a lot of students, a lot of GA pilots consider ATC to be such a high up authority that they can't argue with them or come up with another plan. And I'm not saying argue, but do what you know is best. You're the pilot. You know what's best. They are there to separate aircraft and sequence them in for landing. So be assertive when needed. Say no when you can't, and ask for a different option when you need it. But most importantly, if you're having a problem, declare an emergency.
Yeah, we had, I was just flying yesterday, and something like that kind of happened, and it caught my attention. I love our controllers here in Greenville, and but there was a Bonanza taking off, and we had already just taken off, and there was another aircraft coming in, and so the controller said to him, hey, you can clear for takeoff now, or you're gonna have to wait, right? And so the Bonanza said, okay, we'll take off now. I don't know if they were truly ready. I mean, they were right behind us, so I don't know if they had already done their run up. I mean, I don't know if they, I was in the airplane. But
and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, they might have rushed themselves just because the controller said, well, go now or wait,
So wait.
Yeah, wait.
I was taxiing out in the Airbus a few months ago at Philadelphia. They got 2 runways, a long one and a short one. And they were departing on the short one. Everybody was landing on the long one. And they had a long line of airplanes waiting for takeoff. And I requested the long runway because of our weight. We were flying across the country all the way back to LA. Weather in LA was bad, so we had extra fuel. And we were nice and heavy. Full airplane, full of fuel. I wanted the longer runway. Our numbers said we could use the short runway, but we'd have to add flaps to do it. Mm-hmm. And so here we are trying to make an accommodation with the airplane to use a shorter runway when there's a perfectly good long one right next to it, but they're using that runway for landing. We told it, and I told my first officer, I said, tell them we want the long runway. She didn't want to say it. She said, because there's a lot of airplanes coming in, a lot of airplanes going out. And I said, all right, I'll tell them. And so I said, request, the right runway, the longer one. And they came back and said, well, you're going to have a significant delay. We have a lot of arrivals on that. And I said, that's fine. What they're telling me and delays and things, that is of no concern to me.
Right.
And the decision that I made a decision I wanted the longer runway. And because it's going to take longer is not a reason to compromise that request, even in your oit's mind. So you as a pilot and a pilot in command know what's right. You know what you want. Make sure that you get it, even if it's a little delay. As it turns out, we took off sooner than we would have if we waited in that long line for the other runway.
So all the other pilots I wish we would last for the long runway too. So
right.
Yeah, you never want to be on the other side of a safety review, of an accident review, and the outcome have been I rushed. I could, this
exactly. And I saw an airplane coming in. I was on final once in Mesa-Tabria, and ahead of me was a Cessna 172, way higher than me, and I couldn't find them, and I realized that they were way high, trying to get down, and they were doing this, a little bit of a slip, trying to get down. I could clearly see they're too high, and the pilot said, well, I'm going to go around. I'm too high. And I thought, good idea. And the as he was getting down and starting to go around, the controller came back and said, you've got at least 3,000 feet remaining, and talked him into discontinuing the go around and landing on a 6,000 foot runway. They had 3,000 remaining. Yeah. And then to my surprise, the pilot said, okay. And he powered back and he started down again and landed on the last half of the runway.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, I was surprised that ATC asked that.
Yeah.
But I'm more surprised that the pilot accepted it.
Right. Yeah. Once in your mind, you kind of told yourself go around. I mean, there has to be like an engine out or something that,
right.
That force you onto that ground.
Try to commit to it and don't let someone change your mind for an outside reason.
Right. I'm with you. I'm kind of surprised the ATC would even say that.
I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. Because at that point, if something happens, they kind of took ownership.
I would think so. Yeah. Luckily, nothing did happen.
So, all right. Listen, we've been talking for an hour, and now I'm finally going to get to the point of the conversation, which is talk about proficiency. So you do go by the proficient pilot. You've taken the moniker. And so, typically we talk about proficiency. We usually talk about GA, but I actually want to talk about the airlines too, because we're in a weird situation now where we have a lot of pilots that have been furloughed for a long time. That are now just getting their callbacks, and and they are now have questions about proficiency. They may do their couple of flights and their couple of landings and takeoffs, in simulators or whatever. So at a high level, for the folks that maybe aren't as into it as you or me, so what's the difference between being proficient and being I'm so used to proficient. The FAA current. Thank you. The difference between being current and proficient.
And that's a great question. In fact, it's an oral prep question, and I have many students who've been asked that on their orals. So, please explain the difference between currency and proficiency. And it's a very important concept to grasp, that the FAA requirements are absolute minimums. They're saying if you haven't done this, then you're just not legal to fly. If you haven't made 3 takeoffs and landings in that airplane in the last 90 days, then you cannot carry passengers. You can go out and do them yourself, get recurrent. So that is an absolute minimum. The currency requirements are minimum. Proficiency is where you want to be to feel comfortable and safe. There are many scenarios where you can be current but not safe. So you want to have your level of practice at a point where you're comfortable with it. Something can go wrong, and your flying is going to be second nature, and you can divide your attention to that problem. That at that point you're proficient, because flying is I don't want to say second nature, but it feels more second nature. A lot of the movements, you know where the switches are. So if you haven't flown in a long time, the only way to become proficient is to go fly some more, and read more. Read the aircraft operating manual, get refamiliarized with that, and even the airplane flying handbook, and read some more of that, understand some more, learn more, keep reading. So get your knowledge level back up, but also your skill level. So let's say you haven't flown in a long time, and I'm going to fess up right here. My landings have expired at the airline. Even though I haven't been furloughed, it's been more than 90 days since I've made a takeoff or landing because of what we have going on right now in the industry, and half the fleet being parked, but they're coming back. But for a long time, we weren't doing much flying. They cut the flying levels in half, but we still have the same number of pilots. And then with the government money that came in, they weren't allowed to furlough. So we're paying a lot of pilots to stay at work. We don't need as many. Long story short, my landings expired because I bid reserve and they never called me. And I have to go back to Dallas to go fly the simulator and do my 3 takeoffs and landings before I can fly passengers. As a GA pilot, if you've gone that far as to not be current anymore, you can go do 3 takeoffs and landings and be current, but are you proficient? If you're going to take a long cross country with people from here to Oshkosh and haven't flown in a long time, I'd say you're current but not proficient. So doing the 3 takeoffs and landings will get you current, but what you need to do is go up and do some air work. Do some stalls, steep turns, slow flight, takeoffs and landings, spend some time in the pattern, do all that. Now you've just made yourself proficient. And now I would feel more comfortable flying a group of people and passengers to Oshkosh on a long cross country, which could encounter scenarios that would require those proficiency skills.
Yeah, I like something you said too. Proficiency as far as, we only have, all of us, right? We only have so many brain cells. So, if you're not proficient, you're going to be using a portion of your brain to think through things that would normally be available to think through something else. I know, just my flight yesterday, again, this is the CFI Max show. I was doing something I haven't done in a really long time. And I was in an airplane that had a new different type of Garmin glass screen, and I've never flown it before, so I didn't know which buttons to push and the right, which knob to turn to do right things. And I was under the hood, and so I literally exhausted my brain cells. Like there wasn't any left. So, there was. I actually came home after the flight. I actually left the flight, a little like it was fine, it was safe, all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't at the level of proficiency that I would have expected, that I demanded of myself, anyways. And so I came home and I'm like, all right, that wasn't good. I need to make that better. And so yeah, that's where like, okay, you may have had the number of landings, stuff like that, but that was a proficiency issue. I came home on Flight Simulator, and because I didn't have the issues of knowing how to change the radios and there was enough brain cells, the stuff that he asked me to do was super simple. I just didn't have enough brain cells to be able to focus on it because my brain was doing other things because I wasn't proficient. So.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And avionics proficiency is a big one. If you can get a simulator on your home computer to play with the avionics, that's the biggest thing. We can all get back on the bike. We know how to, pull and make the houses get smaller and push and make them bigger, and how to fly the airplane and physically maneuver it. But becoming proficient will make that easier, and you can do, like you said, you'll have some more spare brain cells to divide your attention to the other thing that you're not proficient with, and that's the avionics. But if you're going to fly an airplane, get familiar with its avionics. That's very important. 172 isn't a 172 anymore. It depends on it's a 172 with a Garmin 750, or it's a 172 with dual VOR DME or ADF, or a Garmin 430 or a King. Autopilot, what's the other one? The King GPS or whatever. Yeah. Collins. Who knows? Whatever. It could be a different brand. It's got something you should become familiar with.
Yeah, and it's amazing, especially in GA, especially if you're a rental. if you're a renter, right? You may have 6 or 7 different 172s, and they all have different setups. In the old days,
KLN 90. That's what I was trying to think of.
Oh yeah.
KLN 91, 92, whatever.
I mean, you may have a number of different setups, different vendors, like you're saying, different vendors. And so, going out and maybe if you're going to go fly an airplane that you haven't flown before, even if you know how to fly that, the type of airplane, maybe see if you can, talk the rental company into letting, if the airplane's not being used, just go sit out there for a little bit. I know in CAP, we can plug in the airplanes, the G1000s. And so we recommend people, actually go out and just sit in the airplane and just play with the knobs and buttons.
Absolutely. The flight school where I teach, they have a ground power unit as well. You can plug in and just sit there as long as you want and use that. The Redbird simulators that some flight schools have are great for that as well.
So, no, we talked a lot about GA, but now I do want to ask one more question for you from the proficiency standpoint. So, as an airline pilot, right, you can't just go rent a 737 and go do some practice. So, I think this is actually really interesting for folks to know, especially nowadays. So folks that are, again, very much like yourself. So how do you guys try to stay proficient when you don't have access to the airplane? Is there little things you guys can do?
Believe it or not, the X-Plane 11 has a lot of great cockpit simulations for airliners, and believe it or not, I use that. It's a very inexpensive flight simulator and very accurate. They've done a great job at making it look and sound just like the real airplane. So for visualization purposes, that's great. What flows. We used to do, absent things like that, is that the airline would give us a panel, which was a picture of the cockpit and switches, and we would chair fly. In fact, when we go to the hotel for training, there's always a pin board, a bulletin board where we can pin these up, pull the chair right in front of it, and you've got your little cockpit, and you go through this and go through the checklist, go through the procedures, find each of the switches and dials and indicators and push things and pull things and levers and all the things that you're supposed to touch on that panel. And you can have your own printed or buy a poster, like a 172 cockpit poster, and go through the checklist, put it on the wall right in front of you at eye level, and put a chair in front of it and chair fly and go through the whole process of a flight. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do, absent going to grab the airplane, to keep current. So we have panels that we do that with. Otherwise, we have the simulator that we can go anytime and go sit in our cockpit procedures trainer. But then a lot of times that's in another city. Yeah.
I think I forgot the name of the company. It's PMDG or PDMG or something like that. They're the ones that make the really accurate sims for airliners. And so for X-Plane, they're still, they said, about a year out, from being able to get that over to the new Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. But chair flying is so good. You can almost always, when you see a new pilot and you see them really proficient in how they're handling all the instruments and working through the checklist, you can tell that they've spent a lot of time chair flying, usually with a flight simulator of some sort. So
yeah, it makes a difference, especially being able to find things, operate switches, and have your hand go to the right place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just that innate skill. Well, Brian, I think that was pretty much all the questions I had. I want to open the floor to you, though. Is there anything that you wanted to let people know about, places to look for you, any talks you have coming up, or anything you want folks to know about you?
Well, I have been focusing a lot of my attention recently on the big popular impossible turn topic. I have taken over the 40 years of research my father has done on that, the impossible turn, the engine failure after takeoff in a single engine airplane, and when you should and shouldn't turn back to the runway. I've done a webinar on that. It's on the NAFI, National Association of Flight Instructors website, memorialized on there. You get Wings credit for it. But I'll be doing a new version of that in the coming months. But anything that I've got going on, I put on my website, which is captainschiff.com, SCHIFF. But also I'm trying to start up, not because I want to become a YouTuber, but I want to have a clearinghouse of short video topics. And so I'll be starting this Proficient Pilot YouTube channel pretty soon, and I'll be getting some things up and running on there that I think are going to be very helpful for pilots. So just keep an eye on that.
That's cool. What I'll do is I'll go ahead in the comment section down below. I'll go ahead and I'll put, or the description down below. I'll go ahead and put a link to to your website that you mentioned, captainshift.com. But I'll also put a link to the FAA Safety's Wings program. So anybody's interested, because it's not like the old days. And I just had John and Martha King on the show, and Martha King is actually one of our leads at Civil Air Patrol. She's on the board of directors, so they're very active in Civil Air Patrol, and they've always been a great proponent. But they're no longer the only game in town. And the thing that is a little scary is sometimes you get a lot of YouTube people. I'm going to be putting some videos up online once I get all the stuff for inside the airplane, and get approval from CAP to show it. But you have so many people showing you how to do things, and the majority of them I think are telling you right. But very similar to how you said, you kind of got to take, like, if you're flying with different pilots, don't assume that you don't have to take everything you see from that pilot. Take what you want, be respectful. Don't go into the comments section. Oh, you stink. I wouldn't land an airplane like that. Take what you want, and give up what you don't. But the FAA safety program and the Wings program, there's so much good content there that that you're getting for the, I think 99.999% of it, is really well thought out. Yeah, so that's really good.
Yeah,
so,
be very careful of what you see on YouTube and what people are putting out there. There's a lot of great information. Most of it is great. Look at different sources, though. Different sources talking about the same topic, and where you see overlap, where you see them overlapping and agreeing, that's usually the rock solid information. And also, I would implore pilots to confer with your airplane flight manual, with the AIM, the regs, and the airplane flying handbook, and the pilot's handbook of aeronautical knowledge. Look at those as the authority. I know we had a kind of a roundtable, and I was talking to John and Martha King, speaking of them, and working on a way to teach instructors how to teach. And we're coming up with this method, how to teach when and how to make that turn back to the runway if you lose an engine. So that's something you're going to see more of in the coming months and years. In fact, the FAA has asked us to try to help come up with, and the Kings are going to be, significantly helpful in that, what we can put in the airplane flying handbook regarding that, because there's really little guidance on that. And there needs to be.
Yeah, I know at our airport, we just say 500 feet. And literally, and I know that's not good enough, because you have wind conditions, you have
so many factors.
There's so many different things that go into it.
Takeoff has its own fingerprint at different airport, different pilot, different airplane. In a Bonanza, you wouldn't do that. Right. Or 210, 172 is different. And if you have a field in front of you, of course, it's not even a factor. You're not turning back. Go straight ahead. That age-old adage, in front of you is where you're going to go if you have a field. We're only talking about when there are no options.
Right.
And there are some airports like that.
Yeah, but yeah, I wish we had more time, because I would love to learn more, from you on your head. So I know that so do me a favor. So you have my email address. So when you are ready to release that information, shoot me a quick note that you've released that, because I want to share that and get that out to the CAP members as well. We have a lot of pilots in CAP. I don't think we've had any accidents that way, but we do a pretty decent job. Like you said, there's some airports that you don't have an option. I know our local airport, we have the main runway we go off of, runway 1. There's a really big golf course at the end of the runway. And we know that we would scare some people really silly, but there's a really long runway. There's a really long grass strip basically we can use it there. So that'd be a pretty funny movie.
That'll be coming out later in the summer, probably.
All right, cool. Yeah, let me know, and we'll get that out to everybody so they can go over to you and check that out on you. All right, well, Brian, I do really appreciate all your time today, and I want to say thank you. And hopefully, if you get to Oshkosh, hopefully we can have an Oshkosh, burger and a drink.
That would be a blast. I will definitely be there, whether they're having it or not, and I think they are having it. So I will definitely be there. You can find me most of the time at the NAFI tent.
Okay. And NAFI stands for what, for the folks that don't know?
National Association of Flight Instructors.
Cool. All right. Awesome deal. All right. Well, Brian, thanks so much. Really appreciate you.
You too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
All right. Bye. Okay, that was our conversation with Brian Schiff. Really down to earth guy. I know that if I was a first officer, that's the kind of, well, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe we don't know what he's like as a captain. Maybe he yells at people all the time, but he seems like a really down to earth guy. It's really great to see so many of the pilots getting back into the airplane. And I did feel that proficiency was a really good topic to have, because with COVID, hopefully, again, it's not over yet, but hopefully we're starting to see the end of the tunnel. Now, Brian didn't write this, but I do want to give a plug for his dad's book. So you can get, again, there's not many box sets in aviation for books. And I'll make sure I don't cover his name. So his dad, Barry Schiff, if you haven't looked at it, he was a writer for AOPA. It just has done a lot of really great stuff. Even in the Middle East, he helped a peace flight, which was really pretty amazing. So if you want to, go ahead and search on Barry Schiff as well. You'll learn a lot of great things. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining. If you're somebody who might be interested in learning more about Civil Air Patrol, the flying that we do, whether you're 12 years old or you're 112 years old, we would love to have you. So go visit gocivilairpatrol.com. With that, we'll have a talk to you soon. Bye, everyone. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you did, please do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content. Up here on the left-hand side, you're going to see another video from our this playlist. And if you click down here, you're going to see another video on our channel. Hope you guys all have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.